Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Muse Arts Artist Holistic Wellness Series as part of the Ties to Community programming. My name is Veronica, and I'll be the mediator for tonight's session. For those who are new, the Artist Holistic Wellness Series invites artists who have different artistic backgrounds to engage in discussion of all music, of all things music. This year, we are back to the healing powers of music, how music can be used as a medium of expression, and how it creates and empowers communities. We will explore artist holistic wellness, community empowerment, emerging artists, music through generations, and the future of music. Before we continue, I want to acknowledge the land we are situated upon. I recognize that we live and work on traditional Indigenous territories. I also wish to acknowledge that I am currently located on the traditional Indigenous territory of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and most recently, the territory of Mississaugas of the Credit. I also wish to express gratitude to Mother Earth for the resources we are using, and I would like to honor all the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people who have been living on the land since time immemorial. In tonight's session, we are exploring music as a holistic practice. So without further ado, I introduce Dhaivat Jani. Dhaivat is an award-winning drummer, tabla player, composer based in Toronto, Canada, a recent graduate from Humber College with a Bachelor in music, and he also leads his own two bands. Hi, welcome to the space, and I'll give you the floor to introduce yourself a little bit further.
Oh, hi, Veronica. Thank you. That was a great introduction. That pretty much sums up what I have been doing recently. But yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a drummer, tabla player, and a composer mainly. And I have a bit of background in production as well. So I work in the studio producing albums for artists and working with them, producing their music, apart from, as you mentioned, leading my own bands. And yeah, I'm putting out music with my album this year. So this is a big year for me this year.
Amazing. It is so exciting to have you in the session today. And what an honor, it's an honor to also be here with somebody who has done work in the field for a while now. I want to introduce the topic by talking about your journey with music. So give me a little bit of background of how it all started.
Absolutely. I started pretty young. I started uh, taking formal lessons on my instrument tabla, which is like an Indian hand percussion drum. It's like two drums, and I started when I was 5. So, and even before that, I remember just like banging on things I could find. So that's my earliest memory with music. But my formal training began when I was 5, and I started learning the Indian classical tradition, and that's as far as it goes. And I never looked back, and it's just been going on ever since. But then from then on, like I was immersed in the Indian classical world for all my early childhood and my teenage years, and then I got into drumming and Western music, and I was heavily fascinated by jazz and how the improvisational nature of jazz relates to what Indian classical music brought to my life. And that's why I pursued jazz music, and I ended up coming to Canada, attending Humber College, and so on and so forth.
Amazing. So is it safe to say that you knew from the start that music was going to be your main passion and career path in life, or did you have some other options, or maybe you had people saying that music wasn't a career at all and maybe you shouldn't invest your time in that? How was that?
No, I would say like this is pretty much what I personally wanted to do all my life, even growing up. And as a kid, I started playing tabla, but it soon became like my from a hobby, it became so much part of my life and my lifestyle that I could just not see myself doing anything else but this. And then the whole umbrella expand as I grew, of course, like when drumming came into my life and like composition and then production side. But I feel like music is where I always felt at home. And from when you say like when people mention about like, yeah, music is not the real career and stuff, which I could see, but especially like I come from a family where nobody else is a musician. Like nobody in my family is a professional musician, but they all have been super, super supportive of whatever I wanted to do. And they always made sure that I give my 100% to whatever I do. And in my case, it being music. So my parents and my brother and everybody was very supportive of me pursuing this.
Amazing, amazing to hear. I talk to so many musical artists and they all have such different experiences coming from different parts of the world, different
For
families.
sure.
So the upbringings of all of them are very different and but they're all doing what they
Absolutely.
love, which is the most important part. I also want to touch on the opportunities that came joining the music industry, focusing on your passion. Like, what did that allow you to grow either personally or like as a community? Like, what opportunities did that grant you?
I mean, it's a very long, it could be a very long, elaborative answer because if I look back as a kid too, when I started playing at age 5 or 6, I remember I started playing. My first tabla lesson was when I was 5, and in 3.5 months, I was asked to do a performance at a big, like a religious conference with like a spiritual leader being there and stuff. And I was so young that like my teacher didn't even tell me, like he didn't even tell me. He told me to tell my mom to call him, and he told my mom that so I was that young, and I performed in front of like few thousand people, and it was like just 3 or 4 months after I started performing, and that just gave me the sense of what this art form can do for me to begin with, and like vice versa, like what I get from people who I perform for. And that was such an early experience that I got as a kid. I was really like 5, and the sense of feeling wholesome being in that community of just like people who are sharing the same love for the art, and that stuck with me subconsciously at that point. I don't know, but and that just kept on going. As a kid, I would just go and perform in my school. I would go perform for competitions, and because I was so passionate about this, like I would just work hard and practice all the times. But when I go and perform at a performance or at a competition and whatever, I get like first prize, and like the compensation was like not monetary at that point, but it was so satisfactory that it just gave me a sense of how being a musician can also be equally satisfying as
Yes.
compared to somebody who would be, I don't know, a chartered accountant or something. And it just like the more I evolved as a musician over the career, like of course my opportunities started becoming more and more in the real life, like in the real world, the professionalism. I started playing with like professional musician. At some point, I became a professional musician. I don't know when that happened, but like I
Mhm.
remember the first time I got paid to do a performance. Like I remember I got whatever, like a small amount of like Indian currency, like rupees. And I'm like, oh, this is great. I can even make money doing what I love. So these incidents really like had big impact on my journey and my faith in what I was doing and what it could do to me. And from the community aspect of things, I feel like music or in general any art has always been such a communal uh, act, or like any art in general, and all the musicians would always be together when they rehearse, when they go to see each other perform. But then when that bunch of people perform for other people, that just brings the other sense of how the other side of community sees you as this bunch of musicians who are performing every now and then in the city. And especially the kind of city I come from, it's not a big city, so like everybody would know each other in that cluster of people, and that just makes the community stronger and like have more trust and faith in each other. So that really made a big impact on my upbringing, I feel, as a musician.
Amazing. Yes. You've highlighted a lot there. Also like the theme of just like a collective support between everybody involved, whether that be the audience or the people actually playing the music, right? The producers, the people backstage doing the lights. Like
Yeah,
there's so much going
absolutely.
on, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
there's like there's a contribution to every single person that's in that moment hearing the song, like anything, right?
For sure. Like for me,
Very, very
even
important.
for example, like I used to play tabla, and tabla is such an interesting instrument to make. So even the makers were a big part of like my
Yeah.
upbringing. Like I would go to the store and just like stay there for like hours while they make my tabla, as opposed to just like it being ready and me going to pick it up. Like it was such a big part of my day where I would just go and sit at the store while it's being done, and I see other people coming in, buying the tabla, and like being in that world in the community is exactly what we're talking about. It was a big part of my upbringing.
Yes, I've never thought about that. I've always thought about the moment you kind of learn how to play the instrument, but the actual people that made it or that invented it,
Exactly.
right? Or the one that
Hmm.
introduced you to it, right? A lot of people
Sure.
say it was my grandmother, it was my mother that played, and then she passed that on to me. Like it's generations, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never really thought about that. I now want to move on to your experience with actually like leading two bands and like, of course, community is a big theme in our series. So how is that? How is having your own band and like working with others?
So that like I would just track back a little bit. So as a kid, I started playing tabla, but then even when I was in India before I moved to Canada, I started performing as a drummer as part of this band, and I was one of the three band leaders. But I was one of the co-leaders with that band, and we started working at this community and as a band. And I feel like working as a freelance musician who is more of a hired gun. I don't know if you know what that means, where I'm just a drummer who would go and perform for different artists, which
Okay.
is more of a freelance thing as opposed to being a band where it's the same five people who perform different shows as that group, and that creates such a it's a family, I would say. And like I started working with that band of my friends, and like we became best friends, and we worked for like 10 years. We worked on albums, like struggles, this, that. So that phase, I feel, had a big impact on me, learning about how it is where you take charge in a way like you're kind of a boss but not really. It's a very thin line where you hire people, but the hierarchy is not the same at all as
Right.
how it would be in any like a corporate structure. But like there is this sense of you taking charge which comes with the responsibilities too, and I kind of knew what those roles were and how much I had to give in, like as part of that band that I used to be a part of. And then when I moved to Canada, I started composing myself, like with my music and my thoughts and my expressions. And that's when I really put together the people I wanted to work with. And that's where I feel I always say that music is half of the actual creation. It's really the people that you work with and the people who bring the music to life. Because what I do is like I make the music in my computer, or like I have the PDF of the score that it looks like, but it's not really a song until the people play that song. And
Okay.
that's where it's so important for myself as a composer that which people I choose to play that song, or like to bring their own characters to that, because I have a guitar part, but it's not just a guitar part. I want to say like I choose the person or the guitarist that I write the part for, and I know what that person's gonna bring to that music, which is gonna make it so unique and individualistic in a way where even though it's my song, it's gonna become they're gonna bring their soul to that. And that's where like for me, being a band leader is such a love-hate relationship, more love, I would say. But the hate bit is like you have so much freedom that you have such a big responsibility that comes with that, where you can pick anybody to play the music with. But that also makes it how important every person you choose has a role to play in the music that you make.
Yes, a very you have a big role. You have a
No,
lot, a big
absolutely.
responsibility for sure. And I love talking to artists from different mediums. And I'm really interested. I've never really talked to a composer. So I'm interested
Mm.
in the actual creative process of composing a song, or I don't know what term you would use, but like what inspiration do you grab off of? Like what really inspires you to sit down and like, okay, I'm gonna create this today.
I feel first of all, with every composer, the process is different, but I can speak for myself. For me, I write two different ways. One is like I would write for myself, but then sometimes I'm commissioned to write for something. So in that case, like I'm given like fairly strict guidelines that I have to write for. So that's completely different. And then I would follow the guidelines and what the song is required. But I feel more creatively free when I have to write for myself. And I write like instrumental contemporary jazz music, so I don't work with lyrics. I've tried, but I suck, so
Not for
I've
you.
given up. Not
Yeah.
not for me. But I feel even though my music is instrumental, it's very cinematic, and I feel very different, like real life experiences, how a singer-songwriter would write a song about an experience or an emotion. I
Yeah.
feel the same way, but I just express differently. So it would depend. But for example, I have a song. It's called "It Might Rain," and it's coming out next week. In fact, it's coming out in a couple of weeks. But the song is it's a story about a day in Toronto and how the weather, like it being sunny to being like overclouded, and then it started raining, and then it becomes
Yeah.
sunny in the same day. And I had plans to do that day, but then everything was just like ruined by the way it rained, and like everything changed, and like how my day progressed and how I felt emotionally through the day
Wow.
with how the weather was reacting is what the song is about.
Mhm.
So it would all depend, but like I feel my songs would come from such experiences or just like emotions that I would feel from either one particular event or sometimes even like a fictional character or some. I wrote a song about Breaking Bad, the show Breaking Bad.
Yes.
So the guy Heisenberg, like his name Walter White, but at some point he becomes Heisenberg, and there was a big moment in the show, but then the impact that it had on me, I'm like, this is very powerful, and I ended up writing a song on that expression. So I feel this is how my inspiration comes from. And then of course there's this whole technical side of things. Like I would compose and like write parts, make charts, bring it to the band, we workshop, we perform, record, etc.
Wow. Okay. I've never been through this process, and just like inspiration just from like a Netflix series can kind of bring
Probably.
that out of you for you to literally compose a song. That's very, very interesting. And like you said, like most people do lyrics and then somebody comes in with the beats or whatever. You do the
Yeah.
opposite, right? You don't work with
Yeah, I
you
can
know,
definitely.
interesting.
And I feel that way, I don't know, like to me at least, that way it keeps the listener or the song itself more open to interpretation, even
Yes.
even though the title itself would imply something. And whenever I perform, I tell the story of like how I wrote the song and what the inspiration was. But then still the every person listening to that song has their own interpretation or perspective on what they're listening to. And that's something I really love working with instrumental music.
Yes.
Also because I can't write lyrics.
Yeah, so I kind of discarded that option. It's like, can't do that one. I'll
Kinda.
do this. No, but
Yeah.
that's very, very interesting. And also the fact that music in itself, like if I'm watching a movie, there's a certain music, and of course you know this. I'm just kind of reiterating what you're saying, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you watch a certain scene and there's a specific music tied to that, the emotions are
Mhm.
felt so much deeper. The way
Absolutely.
that I connect to the character is so different. Like take the music out, I don't feel the same.
Yeah, that's literally what like, and I even work with like so many filmmakers and sorry, documentary filmmakers who I would compose and score for when I was back in India, and that's where my cinematic nature of my music comes from, I guess. And I feel very strongly connected to visuals. Like even though I make music and not music videos myself, but like I always visualize stuff when I make music. Like, and as I just mentioned, right, like the song about the rain or song about this Heisenberg person, it's always driven by visuals that I have seen or they're in my mind or in my heart, and I just try to translate them in a song medium. So I feel like it audio visual is all like a one concept for me, and you could either paint about what you feel or you could make a song about what you feel. It's the same expression, I feel,
Yes.
just the context is different.
Yeah. Wow, what an amazing journey you just like took me through. Now that I watched a lot of things, even though like not a lot of people like take a lot of this into consideration, that's why we built these spaces to have conversations like this. Now next time I watch a movie or a series and I hear the background and I hear the music that's being played, I'm gonna be like, there was so much thought put into this, into the production
Absolutely.
itself. And the just the holistic like creative process of the artist himself, right? Is
Absolutely.
beyond me. Yeah.
Another exercise I used to teach at a film school, and I used to ask my students to go through is, if you've seen a movie already and you know the story and you know the what happens in the movie, etc. And when you watch a movie, like you barely pay attention to music in the moment, like you just want to see what happens visually, etc. But I just give this exercise where I want them to go back home and listen to just the soundtrack, like whatever you can find them on YouTube or Spotify or something. And when you listen to soundtrack, and they are usually in the chronological order of what happens in the movie, and when you listen to the soundtrack just as an album, it seems like you already are watching the whole movie all over again. Like
Yes.
even though you might be staring at a wall, but like what the music does and what it reconnects to what you have already seen, it's just like watching a movie, and that's what I feel my music like takes inspiration from, and that's the world I want to live in.
For sure. And also like the ability and the freedom of your imagination, right? As soon as you
Yeah.
hear something, let's say you didn't watch the movie and you did the same exercise, and now all of a sudden I'm going through the whole track and I'm imagining what could have happened or what's going on, right? And
Oh
it's
yeah.
just a freedom. It's a freedom that you have in your mind to just create and kind of play as a child. Kind of bring in
It
that inner
is.
child and be like, okay, you're free to think of whatever you feel like and interpret it as you wish, right?
Absolutely, and that's the most fun part. And it could be different every time you listen to that same piece, right? And
Correct.
also that's what I feel like it not having lyrics gives you more freedom, because
Mhm.
imagine if there were words, like you're kind of forced to think a certain way where the singer songwriter or the songwriter has given you one direction to think of. Of course, then there still is possibility of you interpreting those words in your own way, but still there is some sense of guidelines given. But when it's instrumental and more open, I feel there like the sky's the limit, and that's the beauty of working with that.
For sure. Wow. What an exciting medium to like work with. For sure. I've heard
Absolutely.
so many. And this is a first for me, so I'm very, very grateful to be even part of this conversation right now. I also want to touch on,
Likewise.
yeah, I want to touch on community just because that's such a big theme that Muse Arts
Mhm.
works with. I want to know
Absolutely.
how you've mentioned something about teaching. Can you elaborate on that? How has that been?
uh I don't teach as much now, but over the years I have on and off like taught students, not always just kids. Like I when I was in India, I used to teach at a film school, as I mentioned, and they were all like undergraduate film students. So they had already immersed in the world of art or filmmaking or audiovisual medium. So working with them was different than when I used to teach 7-year-old drum students in Toronto. And it's a completely different experience in terms of like how they perceive it. But for me, it's the same sense of like giving what I have and how I can make their experience as holistic as possible in terms of like how just giving them tools to work on stuff that they already might know. Like even for a kid, I'm just barely giving them whatever single stroke, right, left, whatever, some technical drumming stuff. But once they know it, it's up to them how to utilize that. And that's where like I feel the beauty of teaching comes in play. And especially with music, I feel having a great teacher is just irreplaceable. Like I know these days everybody's on YouTube, and yeah, like you can just look up and say ukulele songs and like it would show you everything you can do. But I feel like the whole human connection, that's where the community part comes in play, where like when there's a teacher and a student and that relationship, and especially I would say in person, I know we have been moved like to this
Yeah.
digital online world, and yeah, like there are Zoom lessons and stuff, but there are some things where I was learning drums at Humber, and my teacher would come and grab my hand and just like put pressure and see like, do you see the difference? And I would see the difference, I would feel the difference, and I would like experience that sense of touch and like what he's trying to teach me in that moment. And that I feel is irreplaceable. And that, going back to the whole community part, that the elder generation of musician or artists who have lived their share or their bit of
being a student, right? And everybody's a student for the lifetime. But when we compare like how much experience I have versus like the teachers I had at Humber and how much experience they had, not just being a musician, I feel just living life and the
Yes.
experience that they had living a life and how they can uh, translate that to me and how that experience transmission would be different for everybody because each student is different and how I receive that touch would be different than how my colleague would receive the touch. And that I feel is the beauty of teaching. And I feel it's very, there's this liability or sense of responsibility that comes with teaching, which is kind of scary to me. And
Mm.
that's why I'm like, I would just do my thing because when you go teach a student, I feel there's so much, not burden. Burden sounds a very negative word, but you know what I'm trying to say. I feel like there's so much that I can teach the kid, but that also means that if I show him or her something wrong, there's nothing wrong, but it's
Yeah.
gonna be on me and for the rest of their lives. Like
Yeah,
they're
there's
gonna do
such
what they're gonna do.
pressure.
Exactly. So that's just the beauty of being in that community of student-teacher relationship. And I
Okay.
feel sorry, I just wanna add to this, but I feel like it doesn't have to be a teacher student always. I feel even just the community of students, like that's what I learned the most from when I was at Humber for 4 years. Like even just as students, we would all get together and play and we would work on the same stuff that we were all given to work for school. But then how my friend would play the same song that I would play and how that would be different and how we would analyze like him being from, I don't know, metal world or like a progressive rock background and myself being from an Indian classical background, like how both of us would react to the same song differently and how those differences would come in our lifestyle as a musician and beyond was very, yeah, uh, enhancing in terms of like how my experience as a student enriched over the years.
For sure. Yeah, you highlighted a lot of concepts that we also try to highlight with our work, which is the collective um knowledge sharing between the
Hmm.
students and the teacher. Sometimes, like you said, there is a little bit of pressure, like, okay, I have to do this a certain way because this person is learning from me, right? There's a responsibility there. But then the way you see your students interpret what you just taught them, that must be like there must be like some gratification in that. There definitely is like a proud moment, like, wow, like this person is taking what I said and just turning it a whole like a 360 into their own world in their creative process. And I think that's beautiful as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the point of teaching really. You just like give them the tools, and that's what my teacher also would mention when I was growing up. And they would just always mention that they're not teaching me, they're just like showing me what I know. So
Yeah,
that just like has always been, yeah, enlightening experience, and it still is happening every single day. I am with one of my mentors or teachers.
for sure. I now want to move on to maybe like future aspirations that you have within the community. Like, is there specific people you want to work with, or you want to teach, or you want to learn from? Is there specific communities you're looking to work with?
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated from Humber last year. So 2022 is when I graduated. So when I was in school, like my community or sense of pockets of the people that I used to hang out and like work with were mainly students in and around Humber College. But I always had been fortunate enough to start performing outside in the real world, even when I was in school. But that was a little bit limited because I was doing full time school. So now that I graduated, and that happened just after COVID, like I would say, like I graduated in April 2022. So right after the Omicron wave. So that summer, 2022 summer, is when I could really go out in the real world and meet people and start performing with them. And my circle expand beyond what I could imagine in just one summer. So now I don't feel like a student anymore because I mean, like not in the school context, I'm a student for life, but like I don't have to do assignments and stuff. So now that I'm in the real life, I'm meeting people more on a professional level. And I feel in that sense, Toronto is such a vibrant city, and the diversity it offers in terms of like just not just cultures, but just how people are from all over the world, and the languages that they speak, the instruments that they play, and yeah, it's beyond what I could imagine. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to move to Toronto. And it's been way more than what I was expecting. It's just been a year already. So I'm very open and excited to see where this leads me. But my immediate idea is to just, yeah, keep working with like more and more musicians who I have no boundaries really. Like I have been lucky enough to like work with people from all generations. Really. Like I performed last in February at the Rex. It's a jazz club, and like I performed with musicians who are twice as my age, and they've been
Right.
playing for longer than how old I am. But then the fact that I could share the stage with them, and we were performing at this club, and I just felt a sense of gratitude that it would have been impossible if I stayed where I come from. So things like these are pointers that I always keep an eye out for, and like remember and remind myself that these are big moments for me and they happen often. So we might just like take them for granted, but I make sure that I really remember them for what they do to me, and how much uh how much I get out of them. So that's I just want to keep doing this and meet new people, and just explore Toronto to begin with. And then I don't know, Montreal, and then there's so much happening in Canada, but then even
Yeah,
if I can juice out what Toronto has to offer for now.
for sure. Toronto in itself is like such a dense point
Absolutely.
in Canada. Like you will find cultures from all over the world and all sorts of like creative, artistic backgrounds. So you're definitely in the right place when it comes to meeting new people for sure. And it's really interesting that you brought up the fact that you're working with people so much older than you that have learned like a different generation of music. I feel like music goes through
Hmm.
like phases, and the way it's taught, the way
Yeah.
it's listened to, the way it's interpreted, it like goes through these phases. And even that interaction itself is such a beautiful like example of the holistic teachings and the environment that you're in when you're a creative.
Hmm. Of
So thank you so much for bringing that up. I wanted to move
course.
on to the specific holistic teachings that music has brought onto you, and maybe around people that you know as well. Any examples of that?
I feel just my it's so when I even like saw this question, like I'm like I can either talk about this for hours, or what do I talk about this? It's like that. It's one of
Yeah,
those.
there's like no in between.
Yeah, kind of. But I've been thinking about this like all my life, but specifically for what we are talking about. I feel I took this an example for myself, but the whole pandemic was, we know like how difficult it was for the entire world, and everything was shut down. And I was thinking, I was still in school and I was in second year, and I could not play drums for 3.5 months, and that's the longest. I have never played drums since I started. So that experience was just alien to me, and my body, or like if we talk more spiritually, or like something inside me felt so disconnected, because even though I was surviving, uh, there was something that was lacking that I kept looking for. I knew that I was not practicing drums, but because there was no way I could go to school, everything was shut down, locked down, and the priority was to be safe, wear a mask, and all that. So that's what we were doing. But that's when I realized like how big of a part music itself plays in my being, and uh, that just ties to the holistic nature of what music brings to me and the community that I shared. And I did not play, of course, any shows, but I did not even like jam with my friends. I did not like, even though I wrote music, and that's the time I composed the most music that's coming out in the album this year later. But it was all staying just in my computer and in my hard drive, and that just lacked the sense of humanness to it. And even though it was a song made by a human, like not it was playing back through a machine, and that disconnect. And yeah, it was a big moment for me to realize that how big of a role music and the community has on me in my daily life. And when it all came back, I always had been grateful for that, but now there's this sense of really acknowledging that everything I have as a musician, but I can even see like other artists who work in performing arts or like any arts in general, like even painters or people who do murals, because I know like Muse Arts works with lots of communities doing murals or like street paintings and stuff. And things like those would be just impossible, even though those artists could paint at their homes, in their bedrooms and stuff. But it's just like what it brings when you do such things in a space with other person physically being there. It's just irreplaceable.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like as people, once we're faced with such challenge and like adversity, and like at the same time, you're forced into isolation and you're forced to literally just work on like your thoughts and your, like you said, your medium, like you're making all these music, but it wasn't heard, it wasn't expressed.
Mhm.
That sense of community was no longer there. So now that we can feel that a little bit more, thank you for highlighting the fact that it is now not taken for granted. And a lot, like speaking personally, I took a lot of things for granted, and then COVID came and it's like, wake up. You were taking
Yeah,
these things for
yeah,
granted, and now look, right? And now we have the sense of community. We can do murals again, we can go to shows again, we can show our support. There's this collective community once again, which I can never oversee again. And so thank you for bringing that up. That was a huge part of our lives, and now I'm kind of grateful this happened in a sense, because a
yeah.
lot
No,
of
I can
it,
see
like,
that.
yeah, some of the best work was created during COVID, believe it or not, for a lot of people, like a lot of
Mhm.
creatives, and now that's finally coming to light. So if you want to share a little bit more about your album and all your music that is coming, please feel free to do so.
For sure. Yeah. So my one of the bands that I lead, it's called Dhaivat Jani PLUS, and it's Dhaivat Jani. That's me. But the plus part is like I feel I didn't want to call it just a quartet or Dhaivat Jani band or something, because I feel the people who I work with and people who are in my band are not just like random people I end up choosing working with, but they are like very specific musicians and human beings that I resonate and connect with on a deeper level. So that's the band. And I recorded 8 songs while I was at Humber. And the album's called smARTS, SUM, some parts. And that just ties back to like how each individual is made up of like different things, which could be like where you come from, what your influences are musically, what your influences are as your uh, I don't know, like your perspectives on life and stuff. And all of that together makes you who you are. And I feel this album was just one of those moments in my life where I made music, 8 songs it's like a bouquet of like 8 different flowers. And that just is like what I'm going to bring out in the world. And yeah, it's releasing on June 9th, 2023. And I have one song out already as a single, and I have 2 more singles coming out. First one's on April 4th, the second one, and then the third one will be on May 5th. So yeah, people who are watching this can find me on Instagram, website. It's Dhaivat Jani PLUS.
Amazing. Thank you so much for bringing this to us and showing us your talents. Is there a specific platform where these songs can be listened or downloaded?
Yeah, so they will be like on all streaming platforms like your Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, everything. But then Bandcamp is also a website where it's more artist friendly, and I always recommend people if they really want to support the band and the artist, that's where they can like really pay to listen to the music. So that's a platform that the album would be out on. I would also be doing physical CDs. I know it's old school, but
Mhm.
I still feel like the whole sense of holding music in your hand is
Yes.
just beautiful. And yeah, so if people want to buy CDs, even though they don't have CD players, they can still buy the CDs. I have a beautiful I have an artist who did the artwork for every single song, and it's beautiful. Like even just for the sake of the art. Like people who support Muse art, I know like they're more into visual world. They would love like the artwork that the artist has created. So yeah, these are the platforms. And of course, like if you go to my website, dhaivatjani.com, from there they can find all the different streams.
Amazing. Okay. I am so excited for everything that's coming for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to teach me and teach everybody that's been listening so far and kind of bring us into your world as a composer, as a band leader, as an artist, as a human. So thank you so much for the conversation that we've had. Is there any last thoughts that you would like to leave us on with?
No, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to you and the Muse Arts. And I'm happy to be just this point of contact who happens to be in the same city and in the same cluster, in the same community, exactly what we're talking about, where we can share these thoughts that I have, like I can learn from you, and we can just make this world better by just talking about art and bringing art in the world. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And for everybody listening, a reminder that we are going live with Artist Holistic Wellness every Tuesdays on the Muse Arts Facebook page, and you will find all the info to this beautiful artist's creations and new singles coming out down below, so you can check those out. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.